Hi, everybody. A very quick lecture on lighting. We do this a lot more extensively in the spring cinematography course, but I figured I would talk about it to some extent here in the directing class just so that you would not be traveling blindly out in the field. The two themes of this very quick pod lecture are that lighting sources have different colors that show up in your video, show up on your image, and that there's a standard lighting procedure whether you're in Hollywood or in Washington or an indie film or a no budget film, this sort of standard lighting procedure that mimics the real world, and it's called 3 point lighting. So, in this pod lecture, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, we'll talk about lighting shades, lighting colors, the way things will show up on your image, things that can be color corrected in Adobe, obviously, but really should be controlled in the field. And then the basic 3 point lighting construct, I'll go into it in much more detail in the spring semester. So, household lighting or tungsten lighting are the old light bulbs that have the tungsten filament in them and an inert gas inside of a glass bulb. They were outlawed, but made a comeback. So, uh, in a lot of situations, you'll still see tungsten light bulbs in, um, practical lighting in a room. So, if we're in a real situation shooting a documentary, and there's a tungsten light bulb, you'll know it because it casts a sort of yellow orange, very warm color onto your image. And even if you don't see it when you're in the field, you'll certainly see it in your video. So this sort of warm yellow orange, and you may like it to the point that you want to try to match other lighting situations to that color. Uh, on the opposite end of the spectrum is fluorescent lighting. Like the big fluorescent bars that we used to have in so many classrooms and offices. We still do in so many. Sometimes those are LED, but for the most part, fluorescent lighting is just the single worst lighting choice you can make because it makes a green cast on your video, and it makes people in, say, a documentary just look terrible, right? And so that's something you'll absolutely have to color correct when we're doing a professional shoot. As you guys know, I've done maybe 1,000 of these different field shoots over the years. We always turn off the fluorescent lighting as soon as we've set up our regular lights, we in my professional shoots we tend to use LED, and LED, as you know, are color changeable, so you can change an LED to match the sunlight. You can change an LED to match in halogen lighting. You can change it to match an incandescent light bulb. There's not really a fluorescent setting. Nobody wants to shoot with fluorescent lights if possible. Now, if you do and you get a green cast on your shot, you can color correct that and pull some of the green out. It's somewhat problematic, however, when you have, say, if you had a room like this that I'm in now with the LED puck lights that are over me. I've got an LED ring light in front of me. Those are both casting a sort of similar color. If I had a fluorescent source in this room, it's entirely possible that only half of my face would be green. And when that happens, that's really a lot harder to correct. When you've got different types of lighting sources in a room, you really want to try to eliminate fluorescent. They're just bad in all ways. Okay, sunlight. Sunlight is really beautiful to shoot in. It creates a blue cast. Why is the sky blue? Why is the ocean blue? Sunlight is creating that sort of cast reflected color. And so when you shoot in shadows, for example, that when you bring that back into editing, it's going to have that blue tint to it. You may decide you want to keep that. We all, as human beings, understand that the sunlight has that blue color, and a lot of us just filter it out. You could also, again, do some color correcting in Adobe, the color tools. Go to the RGB color bars and pull out some of the blue midtones. Also, if you're trying to shoot day for night, which is where you take a day shot and fake it as a night shot, you reduce the luminance in Adobe and you bump up the blue even farther. And that creates a sort of nighttime look that still has some detail in it, day for night. And if you look at old film, especially black and white film, that's how they shot night scenes. So if you're out in California and in the 1920s, you don't want to have to pay for lights. You don't have electricity run out into the middle of these hills where you're shooting your Western. They would shoot day for night, where they would just take stuff shot in regular daylight, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon during magic hour, and they would then bring it back to the studio, reduce the light level in processing, and shift it blue using filters in processing. Now, the other thing about outdoor shooting is something called magic hour, which I mentioned a moment ago. Magic hour is that time of day when the sun has set behind whatever the horizon is. Say it's a building or a mountain, it's set behind the building, but it's still light. So all of the light in magic hour is reflected. There's nothing intense. And that's a type of lighting, a type of day that looks best on film. So if you look at Lord of the Rings, which was shot outdoors, so many of those scenes, they shot daily during magic hour, so that they could get that really beautiful lighting effect. Um, and many other films do this. A lot of films, when you look at them, when you look at outdoor shots, see if you can figure out where the sun is in the shot. And for almost all outdoor shots, the sun is going to be very low on the horizon or just past the horizon. And they shoot daily in that small time window to get that really nice outdoor sunlight cast. So, casting blue, magic hour casting a little bit differently because it's all reflected, it's a little bit warmer, and that's an ideal time to shoot outside. Okay, last we have halogen lighting, which we're starting to see some of. It's not super prevalent. I think LED is going to push halogen and fluorescent and incandescent out ultimately. It's so much cheaper to operate. It's getting pretty cheap to buy. So at some point, it's going to be all LED, and we're going to be able to control our colors inside the light bulb with just a few clicks, like I've got with my very, very cheap ring light. And I'm sure you guys have that in your ring light where you can change those different color tones. So halogen cast pink. And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about today is 3-point lighting. And I've mentioned this in a lot of classes. I try to mention it very often because it is the sort of standard that we use. And what 3-point lighting is, it's light that comes from three different directions. So right now, I've got light behind my back. I've got a ring light here, and if I were lighting this for real, let me turn on a third light. So if I were lighting this for real, I would put a third light in there somewhere as a fill light just to make that shot look a little better. So you can see how much better that shot looks with the third light. And so I often advocate for students, if you're working in teams, have one member of your team with their cell phone creating some fill light in that shot so that it looks better, right? And you can see as I move that fill light around, where's the best shot. Now see, if I come from here, then my fill light and my key light are coming from the same direction. That's not any good. So what I want fill light that is filling that space different from my key. And I want my most intense thing to be my key light, which here is that ring, and second to have my fill. And that is a sort of natural recreation of our human lived environment, because our key light is always the sun, and the fill light is always the sun reflecting off of water, clouds, buildings, whatever it is that the sun is reflecting off of. And when you use a reflector in photography, you're again creating this situation where you've got key and fill and kick light or backlight. Kick light can be on the wall to pull the person off the wall, and backlight can be on my shoulders. But essentially, they're the same thing. It's lighting the space between the person and the background. So that's what 3-point lighting is. Key is the sun or the ring light or whatever is the most intense thing in your lighting plot. Fill is that reflection, which I showed you I used from my iPhone. And then the kicker or the backlight gives the subject and the setting some dimension. So those puck lights behind me are really nice kicker lights on the back bookcases. So that's it, a short pod lecture on lighting. Make sure that when you are lighting your scenes, you're thinking about 3-point lighting and the rules of Hollywood, using that sort of natural type scenario that we're used to seeing with our own eyes in real life.